Hello, everyone. This is Josellia. Welcome to the Almighty Network. And today I have on the phone lines with me our former Vice President, Vice President Joe Biden. Hello, Vice President Biden.
Hey, Josellia. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure, our pleasure. We're going to jump right on in this because I know you have a busy, overwhelming schedule on the campaign trail. So we want to talk about a couple of things.
Sure.
All right. Our communities here in South Carolina, we're plagued with gang and gun violence, especially in our coverage area of the Orangeburg, Florence, Sumter, in the Low Country regions, the PD, and the Midlands. Let's talk about your position on gun violence.
Well, I tell you what. Look, I have been fighting the NRA and the gun manufacturers my whole career, and I've beaten them. I'm the only one, quite frankly, that has ever beaten the NRA and the gun manufacturers nationally. And I'm the guy, it sounds awful, I'm the guy. My mother would say, stop bragging, Joe. But I'm the guy who got moved the Brady bill, which has background checks as well as waiting periods, because we've kept the weapons out of the hands of literally several million people who did not have the right to own a weapon. And there's some real disagreements, among the Democratic candidates. For example, that Bernie Sanders voted against those 5 times against the Brady bill and the background checks. And as I've been taking on the NRA as well as the gun manufacturers, he's the only one that's voted to exempt the gun manufacturers from being sued. Imagine what would happen in your station if I came on your station and I said, look, I don't think anybody should be able to sue drug companies for promoting addiction by the opioid, putting out 9 billion opioid pills out there. Or I don't think you should be able to sue the tobacco companies for the cancer that's caused because they lied about it. But that's the only industry in America. The only industry in America that's exempt from being sued are the gun manufacturers. And Bernie supported that exemption for them. So we have real disagreements about how to deal with guns. And secondly, I think we should be in a position where we start when we talk about guns. What people don't realize, we talk about the mass shootings like you saw in Charleston. I know you saw in Las Vegas, and you've seen around the country in Columbine. And that's horrible. But every single day, you know it, and your listeners know it, there's a mass shooting of African-American kids in cities and towns and rural areas, and that occurs every day. Just since 2005, and I feel strongly about this, I apologize, but just since 2005, we have lost to guns, now not suicide, gun murders. We've lost 150,000 innocent, maybe not all of them, but 150,000 Americans. 150,000. I've been there to too many of those burials where the kids and meeting with all those parents up in, whether it's in Sandy Hook or going into into my city on the east side. But it's happening every single day. That's 3 times the number of people who were killed in Vietnam and every war since then, because we can't sue them for the carnage that they're causing. And as president, I promise you, not only am I going to get the assault weapons ban passed again, which I did once, and the limitation on the number of bullets that can be in a magazine as a clip, and making sure we increase the universal background checks, I'm going to go after the gun manufacturers and take away that liability. And you watch how things begin to change in neighborhoods then.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Thank you for that. Let's move on to education.
Yeah.
I know that Dr. Jill Biden is an educator. I spoke with her a couple of months ago here on the Almighty Network. And let's talk a little bit about your platform when it pertains to education, because our children, it's a vital issue for our children.
Oh, it is. And by the way, I've been coming to South Carolina since 1974. Fritz Hollings, and I became close friends with Joe Riley and David Mack and so many people. And education always has been a critical issue, particularly along the road in South Carolina. And here's what I think we have to do. We got to remember that these kids coming from underprivileged areas where you don't have the tax base to be able to have the same facilities, the same number of the paying teachers, etc., they're not somebody else's kids. They're all our kids. Mm-hmm. They're all our kids. And they're the kite strings that lift our national ambitions aloft. And so it's everybody's interest to do something. So here's what I do. And this is what I hear a lot on the road in South Carolina. In so-called Title I schools that have low tax bases, they can't raise a lot of money, mm-hmm. I make sure that we're going to triple the amount of money Title I schools get from $15 billion a year to $45 billion a year. And here's what I'm allowed to do. First, they're going to have to raise teachers' salaries. One of the big problems we have in schools, particularly in schools in distressed areas, is the teachers aren't getting paid enough. Mm-hmm. And by the way, if you graduate magna cum laude from anywhere from Clafton to Morris College to the University of South Carolina, you're going to get paid 23% less if you have a degree in education than everybody else graduating from that university except social workers, which my daughter is, and my wife's a teacher. Mm-hmm. So here's the deal. If we're required to increase teachers' salaries to attract we're short 115,000. If I'm giving you too much detail, I feel passionate about this. Stop me.
That's fine.
We have we're short 115,000 teachers today in America because my generation, the so-called baby boomers, are in fact are retiring from teaching. So, and if we don't do anything about this, we're going to be down 250,000 teachers by the year 2025. And guess who's likely to get hurt on that? The poor school districts are going to get hurt on that, the Title I districts. So what I require is that with this extra money in the Title I schools, that number one, they pay teachers more money first, number one. Number two, that we make a concerted effort, because it shows, all the studies show, that if you have one black teacher, a male teacher or a female, but primarily a male teacher in elementary schools, it increases the performance of minority children across the board. Mm-hmm. It may sound strange, but they're the facts. The third thing that happens is that every single solitary child, regardless of their background, their race, their religion, their color, they can learn as well as anybody else can, given a chance. So that's why with this Title I money I'm talking about, every kid, 3 years old, 4 years old, and 5 years old, will be in school, not daycare, school. Mm-hmm. And your universities down there, and every major university in America has pointed out in the last 8 years from the studies, that if you do that, you increase by over 55%, I think the number is, the prospect that that child, no matter what their background economically, will be able to go through all 12 years of school and qualify to go beyond school, beyond high school. It's gigantic. It can fundamentally alter the nature of what is going on in poor neighborhoods, as well as everybody's neighborhood. Thirdly, if we don't have enough, as you know, because I don't know this, I think you talk about it on the radio, is we don't have enough school psychologists identifying kids with problems early on.
Yes.
We only have one school psychologist for every 1,507 kids in school. All the studies show it's got to be 1 to 700. And these psychologists can pick out those kids who are under stress, those kids who have problems early on, and not send them off to an institution, but to be able to put them in a direction that they, in fact, can overcome their anxieties. We don't have enough school nurses. We double the number of school nurses. And we don't have enough social workers to be able to help guide parents who are looking for some assistance through the process of their children. Because, look, and the other thing I insist on, which some people criticize me for, with this Title I money, they also have to provide advanced placement courses, because they're not a kid, I don't care what their background. Mm-hmm. There's not a kid given the opportunity to start early can't do extremely well and be challenged. Not everybody is going to go to college, but there are an awful lot of people who can, in fact, do advanced work in Title I school districts. So I think we have to just change our whole mindset. Mm-hmm. The second piece of the education, as you know, because there's a number of, I've been a gigantic supporter of HBCUs, including Delaware State in my I always kid with David Mack and others down that way that, and with Jim Clyburn that Delaware State's the best HBCU. But the joke is, here's the deal. We, in fact, know that if you provide opportunities, even if you provide it, which I call for, free community college, and I'm going to invest $70 billion over 10 years in HBCUs to give, because they don't have the ability, because we've not allowed, as a practical matter, because of the racist policies that existed so long in this country. It's awful difficult for African Americans to accumulate wealth, and therefore they have not been able to endow most of the African American, the HBCUs. What this would allow them to do is compete for the major projects the government puts out. For example, my state university, where I went, University of Delaware. Well, they are very, they've competed and got a lot of federal funding for dealing with advanced materials, for lightweight materials, for decks to, the land on aircraft carriers and all that. Or, for example, in our administration, we went down to the Virginia area, the Richmond area, and provided an HBCU with an entire program to teach people how to deal with cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. Well, these are where real jobs are, right. and the government, in fact, provides those jobs. We should be doing that in HBCUs. Last piece about the education. We were able to increase exponentially the number of people who qualified and were engaged in, particularly in the African American community, in what they call the Pell Grants. They are grants to allow you, even if you provide free education, as my wife, when you talked to her, probably spoke about, at a community college. A lot of people can't go because they don't have the money for the food, for the rent, for the transportation to get there, because not everybody lives next door to a college or an HBCU. And so what I'm going to do is double the amount of Pell Grants to $12,000 a year so that you can qualify for that in order to go on to school for either training programs and or community college or college beyond high school, because there's a lot we can do, So there's a lot more to talk about, but education is the key, and it's the fundamental stepping stone of the middle class, and it's not being made equally available to all people, particularly people of color.
Thank you. Now, the world stage. Talk about our place in the world stage. Where do we stand now that we've lost or alienated some of our allies?
Well, for years and years, in the United States Senate, I was chairman of what they call the Foreign Relations Committee. Mm-hmm. And as one of the reasons Barack asked me to be his vice president was that I had a significant background. I've met every major world leader in the last 40 years. Mm-hmm. And the next president of the United States is not going to have any time for on-the-job training because the enormous damage that Trump has done. Here's what Trump has done. He has not only denigrated, think of how he's dealt with our military. He has not listened to his generals or his admirals. We now learn that when he was at the Pentagon, he made fun of them, he degraded them to their faces, he told them, he used phrases, number which I'm not going to use. No president's ever done that, number one. Number two, when I was part of putting together the plan that kept Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, along with John Kerry and others. And he comes along and says we're pulling out of that plan. And what happens? We almost start a full-blown war with Iran, which is the last thing that we need. And they're now on the way to try to get a nuclear weapon, which is disastrous. But when there was an exchange of fire, they sent those rockets into El Asad Air Base. My son, Bo, spent a year in Iraq. My son, Bo, who passed away from from a brain tumor when he got home. He received the Bronze Star, Conspicuous Service Medal. Anyway, he was a hell of a guy. But guess what? If he had been at El Asad Air Base when the rocket attack occurred from the Iranians, and the president said, when he said, you had over 100 people at that air base, 100 military personnel. be the result of, they result in a traumatic brain injury. Traumatic brain injury. And what did the president say? He said, it's not much damage, they're just headaches.
Oh, no.
I think I would have, well, I won't say what I would have. Anyway, but it's outrageous. Secondly, look what he's done. He's embraced every thug and dictator across the board. He stands up even now, even when his own intelligence community felt obliged to go to the United States Congress and say Vladimir Putin is still engaged in election fraud in the United States of America, trying to affect the Democratic primary. We know he doesn't want me to be the nominee. And, he is continuing to do this. What did Trump say? He's trying to get those guys fired who went up and briefed the Congress on this issue. And he stands before the whole world and says in a hearing, in an international meeting some, I don't know, maybe 10, 12, 15 months ago now, he says, why would Vladimir Putin want to interfere in our election? Well, Mr. President, 17 of your national security agencies said they were, did, had, and continued to. They're continuing to do it because they want to see him reelected president. They don't want, in the past day, Hillary elected, or they don't want me elected. Facebook has already taken down thousands of bots that the Russians have put up telling lies about me. Facebook won't even use them. So the idea that, and at the same time, what's he do? He embraces a thug like Kim Jong-un of North Korea, been to the Korea Peninsula, and he embraces him and sends him, quote, love letters. Well, let me tell you something. This guy's a thug. He had his brother killed at an airport, poisoned. He had his uncle had his brains blown out, sitting across a table. You know, this is a really bad guy. In addition to all of that, he praises dictators, Duarte and others in the Philippines. And what's happened? What do you think that does to our standing in the world with our allies? In the meantime, he pokes his finger in the eye of all our allies. NATO is weaker than it's ever been now because they don't trust him. They don't trust us. It's a long way of saying that he's done everything wrong, weakened us internationally. We know, by the way, a poll done in, I guess it was February of this past year, by the Pew Research Foundation. They asked who the most respected leaders in the world are. He ranks below Xi Jinping, the leader of China, and just above Vladimir Putin. When Barack was president, we ranked number one in the world. I mean, this is outrageous. So the next president's going to have to be able to understand foreign policy and national security and put us in a position where, look, there's going to be no time for on-the-job training. The first thing I'm going to be doing when I get elected is the day it's clarified I'm president, I'm going to be on the phone talking to all our NATO allies saying, we're back. We keep our commitments. We're going to do what we think. He treats NATO like it's a protection racket instead of a sacred obligation we have. Attack on one is an attack on all. And I'm not going to be sending a lot of troops on the ground, boots on the ground, to try to remake nations. But I am going to continue to do what I did as vice president, coordinate with all the nations of the world that are democracies to take on jointly the failed states and ISIS and terrorism. Because if we don't have that kind of alliance and trust, we end up being the world's policeman ourselves. And we're not going to do that. So the bottom line is, the next person who's president has to be able to, when they command the stage on January 21st, 2021, be able to know that when he or she speaks, that the world knows who they are and they know who the other leaders of the world are. No time for on-the-job training.
All right. Now, I know we're about out of time, but our last question, healthcare. Let's talk about healthcare. Last but not least. Because
it's one of the most, I hear more about healthcare in South Carolina and, quite frankly, around the nation than I do anywhere, especially since your former governor refused to take advantage of the Medicaid guarantee that we have in Obamacare. And so you have thousands of people in your state not being covered now. And along comes Trump, and he tries to wipe out all of Obamacare. And he's he's in court saying that it should be eliminated. But guess what? It provided for 100 million people who had pre-existing conditions now able to be covered. You have a child with Down syndrome or asthma, or you have had breast cancer before this law passed, and you try to get insurance, but you say we have a pre-existing condition. Pregnancy was viewed as a pre-existing condition, literally, not figuratively. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm going to do, not only is he trying to take it away, not only did your governor not allow Medicaid to be covered in the entire state, but what happens now is that you have Democrats wanting to do away with it. You have Democrats wanting to do away with it. And so you have, again, the people are supposed to be Barack's great allies. Our signature piece of legislation that we're most proud of. What happens is that now you have the Democrats wanting to get rid of it. The same Democrats like Bernie Sanders who tried, we learned just in a major magazine article recently, that he wanted to primary Barack Obama in the second term. I thought we did a pretty damn good job the first term and the second term. I thought he was a great president, always had his back. Well, he wanted to primary him until he got talked out of it by, allegedly, according to the article, by the leader of the United States Senate, Harry Reid. But now there's a full-blown attack on Obamacare. What I propose is adding to Obamacare would become Biden-care, which is to restore all the cuts in Obamacare, number one. Number two, make sure that we add what we call a public option, a Medicare option if you want it. If you qualify for Medicaid, you automatically are enrolled, Medicaid, you're automatically enrolled in this Medicare option that I have. It's your choice, though. You can do it. We lower the cost of every premium that exists to buy into Obamacare, number one. Number two, we insist that drug prices come down dramatically by allowing us to finally get rid of that exemption, and other Democrats support this as well, to allow Medicaid to negotiate for drug prices and prices that they'll pay for across the board for things, because drug prices are outrageous. And I set up a provision where that if it's a new bio-based drug as opposed to a chemical-based drug, which is the new drugs that are coming out, engaging the immune system to fight cancers and the like, I make sure that what happens is that price gets set by a board of 25 experts based on interviews with the companies of how much they spent to get this drug passed in the first place, get this drug done in the first place. And once the price is set, they cannot raise the price of the drug beyond the cost of inflation. But one other thing that I feel incredibly strongly about, and I was able to get it started at the end of our last term, and that is dealing with diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer. I did the cancer moonshot. As you remember, the president asked me to do a year study on what we could do. We made enormous progress, insisting that docs and hospitals share data and information which wasn't being shared before. But here's what I'm going to do. We're going to invest like they do in the Defense Department. When the Defense Department has this special operation called DARPA, meaning that it's advanced research in areas like it's the thing that got us the Internet, the thing that got us the whole idea of stealth technology, all the things to increase our security. Well, I'm going to set up the same thing at the Department of the National Institute of Health, and we're going to invest $50 billion, but we're going to start off at $5 billion a year to focus on the three diseases that affect people most in South Carolina and other places. One, the idea of diabetes. Too many people are dying from diabetes and the complications that flow from it. Not enough research has been done. Two, Alzheimer's. If we don't do something about Alzheimer's, we're going to have, according to every study, and I know this stuff fairly well, is that we're going to have every single bed that exists in the United States today in a hospital is going to be occupied by an Alzheimer's patient, and it's going to cost the United States of America $258 billion per year. That's why you should be investing now to find the cures. Thirdly, We're going to invest significant amount of money in it's a mission I have in dealing with cancer. We're on the verge of a number of cures for cancer. Cures for cancer. Mm-hmm. If we invest the money we have to invest. And I can get, I believe, Republicans as well as Democrats to vote for that. Last example I'll give you is that at the end of the administration, all my colleagues that are running for the nomination talk about, Joe did a lot of things that he got done. Joe got the Recovery Act of $90 billion passed him. Yeah, Joe passed the Violence Against Women Act. Yeah, Joe expanded the Voting Rights Act. But that was the old days. This is a new Republican Party. Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you something. I know a lot about this new Republican Party, and I know how mean it is. I've been the object of their affection. But even in that circumstance, after the President Trump was elected in November, before he was sworn in January 20th, I put together with 3 leading Republicans and 3 leading Democrats a thing called the Cures Act. After McConnell said we're not going to do any more appropriations at all, the president's sworn in. Well, guess what? That provided for $1.8 billion in cancer research, specifically the things that I had worked on in the moonshot, and another almost $7 billion at NIH on research for other diseases. We didn't have the votes for it when we started, yet I was able to get it passed during that period of election and sworn in, and we got 95 Republicans voting for it. Mm. We got over 396, I think it was, members of the House to vote for it. And because I was presiding over the Senate as vice president, when it passed, Mitch McConnell stood up and asked that the cancer research money be named after my son, Beau Biden, who died. It's called the Beau Biden Fund. And so the idea that we can't get things done, mm-hmm. I think, is just absolutely bizarre. There are things that people agree on, from infrastructure to health care and I think we can get it done. But we've got to be honest with the American people, though, and tell them what it's going to cost, how we're going to pay for it, why we're able to do it, and demonstrate that we've been able to do things like that in the past. I'm the only one, along with Barack, who's ever gotten a major piece of legislation passed relating to health care like that in a long, long time. So I'm optimistic that, let me just end on this note. We get rid of Trump as president. It frees up a lot of people who are just scared to death of his retribution on the Republican side. And I think we're better positioned, the United States of America, to own the 21st century than any country in the world. I got elected when I was 29 years old. I had to wait 17 days to be sworn in as a United States Senator. And at the time, they called me the optimistic and idealistic young man. I'm more optimistic about America's chances and how we can make life better for all Americans, for all those folks we talked about in South Carolina, than I've ever been in my whole life. We have more great research universities than any country in the world, and all the world combined. Every new idea comes out of those universities, and American people own them. We have the most productive workers in the world. They're 3 times as productive as workers in Asia. We have the most energetic people in the world. We have the greatest scientists in the world. We're in a position where we're so much better positioned. I'm excited about being able to not only take back this country, but move it forward like no time in the recent past.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vice President Biden. It's been really enlightening, really enlightening. We just thank you for sharing with us and for taking out the time to come and talk to our listeners.
Thank you. Look, I as the old expression goes, I come from a state that is the 8th largest black population in America. It's been the source of all my support, my passion from the time that I got elected. And they got me elected, not a joke. And I got back from law school. My city was occupied by the National Guard after Dr. King was killed, and I had a great job with a fancy law firm. I quit, became a public defender, got engaged in all the things on the east side of anyway, I just think of the opportunities to be able to this time rebuild the middle class, but bring along the black community like it's never been able to have the opportunity before. I'm just optimistic we can do this.
Well, we appreciate you. We really do. We really do.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for taking the time. Bye-bye.
Oh, our pleasure. Have a great one and be blessed.
Keep me in your prayers, please.
We will. Vice President Joe Biden, everybody. This is the Almighty Network, Almighty 105.1, Almighty 98.3, and Almighty 94.5.